To start with, I want to stress that, as some of you may know, this year is the 100th anniversary of the birth of George Batchelor, who was founder of GFM and founding head of DIMTP. And so the title of my talk is inspired by this paper by George Batchelor and Townsend that was published in 1949. And the context of this paper was that it was written 8 years before Kolmogorov theory and a couple of years before the first observation of the actual Kolmogorov law that you see here. But already in 1949, Batchelor and Townsend discovered that the Kolmogorov theory was incomplete. As you may know, it was based on a self-similarity hypothesis. And if it were true, then the velocity, the flattening factor of velocity derivatives that is defined on this transparency here should be independent of Reynolds number. And what Batchelor and Townsend discovered is that it actually depends on the Reynolds number, as you see on this graph, and the dependence is more and more pronounced as you go to higher order n. So Batchelor and Townsend investigated further what could create them, and here you see an oscillograms of fluctuations and at different Reynolds number. And just from this oscillogram and the previous observation, they made 4 important and visionary remarks that I have highlighted here. First, they noticed that the energy associated with large Reynolds number is very unevenly distributed in space. Right now we call it intermittency. They say that the spatial inomicity is more marked with increase of the order of the velocity derivative, that it may be created by vortex quickly rolling up, and that it is maintained, this inomicity is maintained by the action of the energy transfer. So in this talk, I will revisit in some sense the work of Townsend and Batchelor, by using the fact that now, with respect to the time of Batchelor and Townsend, we have much better experimental velocity measurement, thanks to the use of fast cameras and lasers. We can now record all the tracks of velocity in some small volume. So here is an example as a recording we did in a von Karman experiment that you see at the top right. And with a team that is written down. And you see that we are able to track about 40,000 trajectories in a small volume. With respect to Batchelor and Townsend, we also have a modern numerical simulation. So here you see a list of people who collaborated with me on this topic. So you can have either classical homogeneous isotropic turbulence. So for example, here with a forcing through a Taylor-Green flow, which mimics the von Karman velocity flow. And on the right, you see that now we have also at our disposal direct numerical simulation on our von Karman experiment. And so thanks to this, we can now investigate more what is going on at a small scale. And if you want to look, for example, at how does the vorticity look like, you can use the Q criterion, in which you say that you look for a region where the vorticity overrides the strains. And in our experiment, if you do that, then you see this kind of mess, a lot of little structure with a lot of different shape. And if you look at the distribution of the dimension of this structure, you see that the dimension is between 1 and 2. So you have everything from filaments to sort of vorticity sheets. And what we know also from experiments and from numerical simulation, that this structure, they can interact in a very complex way. So for example, here you see a numerical simulation of interaction of rings, but really it was already observed by Tim Nichols, who used to be in the DIMTP in 1992. And you see that this interaction is very complex, and when the rings interact, it leads to formation of secondary, tertiary filaments, a kind of cascade of formation of more complex structure. We also have the same kind of interaction for filaments. And here you see a beautiful numerical simulation by Yaro and Hussain. And this paper is actually free online on GFM. And you see that shows the interaction. You also, after the time of reconnection, you see formation of a lot of small scale structure, which can have a lot of different shapes, rings, and also filaments. And what is very interesting is that if you look at the energy spectrum during this interaction, here the time of reconnection is 1.55. You see that just after, you see local formation of a K-5 third law. And so by this kind of interaction, you can explain the origin of the cascade that is seen by Kolmogorov. What is very puzzling is that now if you look at how the reconnection proceeds, so for example here, if you look at the distance between the two vortices, you see that before and after reconnection, you have some sort of power law, which means that reconnection could be self-similar. And this was investigated in a lot of papers, and a very, very recent series of papers, Kimura and Moffat, show by Biot-Savart's evolution of vorticity that it could be a self-similar evolution leading to a blow-up or quasi-blow-up. Indeed, if you look at the distance between the two vortices, you see that it decays like a square root of the time to reconnection. But if you look at the maximum of velocity during this interaction, it increased like 1 over square root of the time to reconnection. So eventually, if you continue this process ever and ever, it would lead to a situation where the velocity blows up. In fact, there is another indication that there might be a blow up or near blow up in turbulent flow, and it comes from energy dissipation. Indeed, for example, in the von Karman experiment, but in any other experiment on numerical simulation, you see the same thing. If you look at the non-dimensional energy dissipation as a function of Reynolds number, you see that after a certain Reynolds number, it saturates and becomes constant. So given that the energy dissipation is proportional to viscosity times the entropy, it means that the entropy is proportional to epsilon over nu. And so in the limit where nu tends to 0, entropy is diverging. So this means that there is at least one point in the flow where the vorticity or some gradient of velocity is blowing up. And in it, if you look at probability distribution of the vorticity, it has very wide tails that increase as you increase the Reynolds number. So this is suggestive that very small velocities are very irregular and can even maybe blow up in some suitable limit. And if we want to get to understand the structure of the small scale motion, we need to track such events, but to track them in an appropriate way, taking into account the fact that they are very irregular. So this is kind of difficult because, as I showed you, these small scale are very messy. They are very entangled between each other. And so this amount to say, how can I find a needle in a haystack? How can I find event like reconnection or very high velocity gradient in a structure like this? How do I do? So in the rest of the talk, I will build two scalar indicators based on regularity properties of the flow that will help us detect what kind of events are interesting, and then how can we characterize them. So to build the first scalar indicator, I will come back on the local energy balance and come to work by Duchon and Robert in 2000, where they made a local energy balance of the energy in the fluid, taking into account that the velocity field might be very irregular. And it takes the following shape. Then you have the time variation of the local energy plus the divergence of the flux of the energy of the local energy current is dissipated by viscosity. Here is the normal viscous dissipation. But then there is an additional term, d of u, which takes the following form. It is a limit as L tends to 0 of the convolution of the gradient of a regular test function with the third power of the velocity increment. The regular test function comes because they have taken into account the regular nature of the small scale motion, and so they have used what is called the weak formulation of the Navier-Stokes equation. So this term is interesting because it can have a zero limit, and this is the thing that you are used to. But it can also have non-zero limit. And to see that, you can imagine that the local velocity increment scale is like L to the h, in the limit like L tends to 0. So d of u, it goes like the limit as L tends to 0 of L 3h minus 1 by dimensional counting. And so you see that if the velocity is regular at small scale, then you can do Taylor expansion. And so h is equal to 1. So d of u is the limit as L tends to 0 of L square. So it tends to 0, and it provides no contribution to the local energy budget. But in fact, this is true as long as h is greater than 1 over CERN. So as long as h is greater than 1 over CERN, this term d of u does not contribute, and the local energy balance is valid. The classical local energy balance is valid. But as soon as h is smaller than 1/3, and this is happening if the velocity field is irregular enough, then this term is not bounded anymore, and it can be non-zero. And in that case, you have dissipation through irregularities, through singularities, and without the need to have viscosity. So this provides us with the first idea to find our needle, is that if you want to find areas which are very irregular, then we could try to track in scale this term, which I devise in red. So this is a scalar function. If delta u goes like L to the h, it will go like L to the 3h minus 1. And so we will follow this term in scale to detect region where the fluid is very irregular. So I just want to mention that this term has a classical physical interpretation. It corresponds to local energy transfer. And so if it's positive, it corresponds to a local energy transfer towards small scale. And if it's negative, it will correspond to a local energy transfer toward large scale. So to give you an idea of how it works, let's take a simple example. For example, let us consider a solution to the Burgers equation. As you know, this equation in the inviscid limit develops shocks, which are singularities. So here I have an example of a real singularity, which is the blue line, and the red line. And of course, if you add viscosity, then you will regularize, and you will have just very strong gradients, like is shown in the green line. So if I take this velocity field and I applied my scalar indicator, I computed as a function of length of scale. This is shown below in the bottom panel. So on the left, you see what it gives without the viscosity. So you see that the scalar indicator is 0 almost everywhere, which corresponds to the location of the velocity of the ramp here, where the velocity is regular. So this is, as we see, this is normal. But at the location where there is the singularity, it becomes higher and higher as you go down the scale. And actually, it is a kind of arrow that points towards the irregular point. And even if you have viscosity, that is, if you don't have a real singularity, but just a place where the gradients becomes very large, if I compute my scalar indicator as a function of scale, you see that it still points towards the area where you have very large velocity gradient. And after some point, of course, it becomes 0 because there is no singularity, but by looking at how it points, you can see where are the most singular points. So let's do that in a real flow. Here we did it in our Von Karman 3D flow. So here are an example of a computation of the scalar indicator at different scale. And on the right, you see exactly the same representation that I did for Burgers. And you see that there are also arrows, red or blue, because it can be positive or negative, local energy transfer. And you see that they point towards special points. And if we look at these special points, they are not just noise, they are very organized small-scale structure. So on the left, you see an example. Most of them look like this. They look like filaments or fronts. So on the top of this image, I have put the velocity field, and you see that they correspond to a situation where there is a front or a shock just at the location of the structure. And on the right, I show you another kind of structure that we also saw. It's a kind of spiral. And you see the velocity field is rotating around the points where the scalar indicator is the largest. So where we stand so far is that we have found a nice scalar indicator to detect location where velocity gradients are really big. But what would be nice is to characterize somehow better these things, to quantify how big they are. And so now I will develop a second indicator, which is based on the reinvestigation of Batchelor and Townsend ideas. So Batchelor and Townsend ideas look at flattening of velocity gradients or velocity derivatives. But as I show you, we cannot really look at them directly because since the flow is very irregular, we need to develop an appropriate tool to consider this property. So we consider a weak formulation of the velocity gradient, that is either of consider the velocity gradient, we regularize them by a regular test function, and so we consider the convolution of the gradient of this test function with the velocity. So this is a quantity that is always well behaved because we never differentiate the velocity field. In the limit L tends to 0, if the velocity field is regular, it will tend to the velocity gradient. And we can study this quantity. It's always well defined. And for some reason of dimensionality, I will consider rather delta WL, which is multiplied by L, so that I have something which is homogeneous to a velocity, or a velocity increments, if you want. So this quantity has nice scaling properties. If I look at the moment of this quantity as a function of n, you see that it behaves like power laws for some range of scales that are high enough with respect to the Kolmogorov scale. And if I look at the exponent of this power law, you see that these are the red star, that it is a kind of bended term that deviates from the curve n over 3. And this curve, in fact, is a curve that will be predicted by pure Kolmogorov theory, that if the turbulence were self-similar, then all these velocity gradients should scale so that the exponents are n over 3. And so we see deviation from Kolmogorov theory, and the deviation increases with the order n, exactly like in Batchelor and Townsend paper. But if you want to be more close to Batchelor and Townsend, you can also define a kind of flattening by considering rather this quantity, which is just the structure function of order p divided by the structure function of order 3. Here there is a typo, excuse me, to the power p over 3. So if the turbulence is completely self-similar, these things should be flat. And if there is intermittency, you will see that this curve will gradually depart from the flattening state. And this is indeed what we observe on the left. Same geometry, this is in von Karman experiment. You have different data points. So the different symbol with no black on it, they are different experiments at different Reynolds number. And the symbol with black are result from DNS of our von Karman experiment. At a different Reynolds number. And you see that they all point to the same thing, is that at low value of P, there is almost no intermittency, but as you grow, then you have more and more deviation from the flat states, which would be self-similarity. And you can, in fact, they behave as power law, and here you have the exponent of this power law as a function of P. You see that it's a sort of a parabolic curve. And but if we consider now, instead of considering the same geometry but different Reynolds number, we see that the thing do not collapse anymore. I mean, there is a wide variety of flattening factor, a little bit like what was observed by Batchelor and Townsend. But in fact, there is some kind of universality in this. And this was a remark made by Verga, Sola, and Frisch, or Castin et al., is that now if you renormalize both the scale and the quantity, the flattening factor by quantity beta of Reynolds, then there is a way to collapse all the curves in an universal way, independently of Reynolds number and geometry. And here is an example with on the far end, here on the right corner, I show you the factor beta that was used to collapse all these curves together. There are curves of different experiments, different geometry, different Reynolds number. And you see that the main thing is that it depends on the Reynolds number, like a logarithm. It is a logarithmic law. So there is this universality. In fact, is very profound. Is rooted into a thermodynamic analogy of turbulence, which is explained in this paper, and it is connected with extensivity of the free energy. But what it means is that since scaling exponents are universal, and in fact they correspond to a kind of multifractal pressure, we can use them to derive useful properties of velocity gradients that are independent on geometry and on Reynolds number. And this is why I'm going to build the second scalar indicator on this property. And how I do that is motivated on this remark, is that if you look at the scaling exponent, the moment of large p, their scaling, you notice that they are governed by the tail of the PDF. The larger p and the wider you go into the tail to build this moment. This inspired this construction is that if you consider the velocity, the scaling of the velocity increment as a factor of the order n, imagine you go at some order p, and you draw a line that is tangent to this curve. This line has a slope and an intercept. The slope, I call it h of p, and the intercept, I call it c of h. And here C of h is given here as a function of h. Physically, C of h is connected with a large deviation function of the probability of log of delta W scaling like L to the h. So this function C of h gives the probability to observe h, while h gives you a kind of a local Hölder exponent characterizing the flow. So by doing this, and this is explained in this paper published in PRE, you can have a map that is a map between a value, typical value of h, and typical value of the velocity increment. And this map is shown here. And so using this map, you can go from a map of typical velocity increment to a map of h, which we call it pseudo-Hölder exponent. So what you see directly from here is that, for example, when you have very large velocity gradient here of the order of 0.7, using our map, we see that it corresponds to a value which is close to h equal 0.3. And more generally, the lowest h and the most irregular the flow is. And if you say that the velocity increment scales like L to the h, this pseudo-Hölder, you can show that it gives a proxy to h. And this pseudo-Hölder exponent is connected with the area of large vorticity, as Batchelor and Thomson said, but it's not exactly equal to it, as you can see here from a vorticity map and a map of pseudo-Hölder exponent. You don't see a one-to-one correspondence, but you see there is a kind of correlation. There is also a correlation with the previous regularity indicator that I built based on local energy transfer. And you can see it from this joint probability distribution here, where I plotted the joint probability of the log of the scalar indicator D of L, which characterizes local energy transfer, and the probability of a given H, local scaling increment. And you see that there is a clear correlation. The highest DIL is, and the lowest H is. And so more specifically, if you look at the probability to have a given H, this parabolic shape, you have region of high DR on the left of H equal 1/3, and the region of low DR on the right of H equal 1/3. There is a statistical correlation, but there is also a temporal and spatial correlation. So here I show you now a map in the physical space. So on the magenta one, I see a local isosurface of H equals 0.7. So at the center of this structure, there is a very irregular field with H equals 0.3. And you see that this takes the shape of a filament, and it is surrounded by a region of very large local energy transfer in red and local negative energy transfer in blue. So you see that there is a sort of temporal and spatial correlation, but it's not, again, a one-to-one correlation. So what I'm going to do now is to look these two scalar indicators to see at the most irregular point. So I want to see the points that are both very high local energy transfer and both very small h. So for the local energy transfer, it will correspond to h that are around 0.2 or well, at least much lower than 1/3. And for the local energy transfer, whose distribution is very special, very non-Gaussian, it will correspond to this point here that I circle in black, where the local energy transfer is larger than 100 times, that almost 200 times the standard deviation. So with this criteria now, I can go back to my velocity field and look at this point and look at the velocity field and the vorticity field around this point and see how they are organized. So we did that in all our experiments. And we found that mainly it was distributed in 3 types of structure that are that we differentiate by how the streamlines are around this point. So here we call this screw vortices. So this is an example of a screw vortices. At the intersection of the 2 black lines, there is a point where you have the highest local energy transfer, and around you see the organization of vorticity. So you see that these points correspond to the inside of a kind of vorticity tube. And if you look at the velocity around this point, you observe that also there is very large velocity, because here on this color bar, you see that 1 corresponds to the velocity corresponding to the highest velocity that can be observed in our field. So this is what we observe in experiment. We have the same kind of things in numerics. So in numerics, we were able to track the lowest Hölder exponent. And here you have an example of a very small Hölder exponent, where there is an organization of Hölder in the shape of a filament. The local energy transfer are around this local filament, and this corresponds to a screw vortex. Here you see the velocity streamlines that are like this. We also observe a second type of structure. We call them roll vortices, but again, they are not very different from the first one, because if you use a Galilean transformation by a shift of the mean velocity, you could turn one into another. But again, this corresponds to a filamentary-like structure and with very high velocity and kind of a very windy streamlines around this point. Again, we observe them in numerics by tracing very low pseudo-Hölder exponent. And we also have a third type of things. We call them U-turns. They correspond to a region where the local energy transfer are very, very big but negative. And in that case, we see that the vorticity is organized into 2 sheets apart from the point. And we also have this in numerics. And so all these things could in fact be the different step of the same thing, which is the roll-up of the vorticity sheet, exactly like Batchelor and Thomson indicated. So now something we can do in numerics, and we didn't yet do an experiment, is to build a typical event by taking all the region where H is the smallest. As I showed you, they all look like more or less or like vorticity tube. And now we can orient them so that all their axes are along the Z direction, and then average them. And if we do that, we obtain a typical, very singular structure. And here you have a look at this. It is a vorticity tube. So now if we look more close inside its structure, well, we notice that it looks like a Burger vortex, but not quite a Burger vortex. For example, here, if I look at the anstrophe, you see that it takes the shape of the filament of vorticity, but there are some slight deviation at the both sides. There is a mod M equal to. So that if you look at a profile of the vorticity in this plane where there is no this kind of little ears, then you can fit very well the vorticity profile by a vortex, by a Burger vortex. This is the black line, and the blue point are the data point. While if now I look at vorticity profile in that cut, a cut that goes through the two little ears, then you see that there is a very big deviation from the Burger's vortex. So what we observe is a kind of Burger's vortex distorted by something. And in fact, if you look closely at what we see, where does the kind of ear come, it's as if it was a kind of remnant of an interaction with another vortex. Remember that we have average over 200 structure, and if this big pseudo-Hölder exponent or big local energy transfer comes because of interaction between two vortex, by averaging, we might cancel out the weakest vortex and only keep the strongest one. And the little ears that we see could be just the remnant of the interaction. So to test that, we have gone further, and we have tried to follow in time such event. And so here, I show you an example of interaction. So there are many things to watch at the same time. On the left, what you see is an ISO contour of vorticity, where we have tried to highlight when there are two vortices, there will be one blue and one red. On this panel here, you have the pseudo Hölder exponent. And here, the third panel is a local energy transfer. And the last panel is a local energy dissipation. And on the bottom, what you see is how the maximum vorticity evolves in time, how the minimum Hölder exponent evolves in time, how the maximum positive and minimum negative local energy transfer evolve in time, and how the local energy dissipation evolve in time. So let's have a closer look. So you see that as time proceeds, you see clearly the two vortex start to interact. At the time where they interact, the vorticity is maximum, but the Hölder has gone through a minimum just before the interaction. So the Hölder first goes minimum, and then the vorticity goes very high. And the local energy transfer has gone, in fact, they have gone very large, also a little bit before the interaction and a little bit before the H got to a minimum. So the way it goes, the two vorticity filaments interact. First, the local energy goes to a maximum, then the pseudo-Hölder goes to a minimum, and then the vorticity goes to a maximum. So here you have the full movie. I show it to you. So I show it to you again. Okay, so this seems to confirm that these very low regularity region or high energy transfer are connected with interaction. So in experiment, we don't have yet the result of a resolve in space and time following of this structure. We have a lot of data. It's very long to process them. So we just have a preliminary snapshot of one event that we could took. So here is a place where the local energy transfer is very big. And you see in the vorticity contour, you see that it corresponds to the location where there is one filament and another one which is in the plane perpendicular to the observation. So you see that it corresponds to the interaction of vorticity filament which are perpendicular to each other. So we are doing much work to follow this event. This is work under process. And so I will conclude here by this summary and perspective is that what I show you is that we have defined two scalar indicators to explore the nature of small scales in experimental and numerical, down to the Kolmogorov scale. This scalar indicator help us to characterize the very irregular small scale on turbulence. And we found that they are organized in coherent structure, living below the Kolmogorov scale. And this structure could be associated with reconnection event and be the footprints of dissipative singularities of Euler equation. This structure is also connected with intermittency because they correspond to values of pseudo-Hölder exponents that can be much smaller than the h = 1/3, which is the value of the Kolmogorov theory. And altogether, our result confirms the remarkable visionary observation and interpretation of Batchelor and Townsend. That is, I have shown you that the local energy transfer are very important in shaping the intermittency. That the organization of a small scale is very intermittent, and that the intermittency could come from either reconnection or roll-up of vorticity sheets. And our perspective now, we are studying the dynamic and properties of this structure in experiment using 4D PTV. And also we are currently building a larger experiment to be able to explore sub-Kolmogorov regimes to look for even more singular structure.